if at any time you want to ask a question, you can do so in the chat, or you can raise your hand. There's an icon option at the bottom of the screen where you can make a thumb or I don't know, heart or whatever. But one of them is to raise your hand, and if you want to actually ask a question verbally, which would be brilliant for me, to feel like I'm actually speaking to people and not a computer. But anyway, if you want to ask a question, you can go ahead, you can ask. This is about part 3 of the speaking. Very different from the other parts. As you know, we've done before now, we've done part 1, which was the questions. Hello, Mainara. The questions that are asked in part 1 to you, the things about you, what you like to do, how you spend time, birthdays, past, future, things like that. Part 2 are the pictures that you have to answer a question. You have to compare, contrast, use your linkers, use speculation, speculative speech, but maybe some opinion phrases if the question is, what do you think, or whatever. Now, part 3 is quite different. I'm going to go through the format, some techniques, tips, same as every week, okay? So first of all, what I'll do with you is I'll share a screen, which is basically, if I can see it, there we go. Okay, I don't know if you guys are doing advanced or FCE, but anyway, you'll notice here that the diagram is actually exactly the same. So this is the part of the exam that is, it's longer than part 2, and it's interaction. So it's a collaborative part of the exam. It requires candidates to speak to each other and basically have a discussion. So when you have a discussion, of course, interaction is the key thing here. A lot of people find this difficult, not just difficult, but unnatural. If you go to the exam and you get a partner that you don't know and you have to speak to them for a few minutes, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but you just have to think that it's, you know, in total, the speaking exam is about 15 or 16 minutes of your life where you can be over-exaggerated, try to use expressive language and things like that. So it's an interaction. It's 4 minutes long, but it's separated into 2 parts. And I think that this is a very important thing to remind you of. So if we just say 2 and 2 minutes, more or less, it's actually not that. It's more like 2 minutes and then 1.5 minutes. They changed the structure of the part 3 speaking exam a few years ago, and there's a very good reason for that we'll speak about. So it's 4 minutes in total, so you more or less are going to get 2 minutes. But part 3, although it's 4 minutes, it is separated into 2 sections. Okay, you can see here that this is the format. This is how it looks. So you've got a question in the middle, and then you've got 5 different options that you can use to base your discussion around. There are things to avoid, like in every part, and there are things that you must do. Okay, I'm going to go straight actually to the things that you can avoid, or that you must avoid, and I've actually prepared a document here. So one of the things, like always, that you need to do when you get a question, and the good thing about this is that you actually see the question because it's written down and you both see this diagram. You've got keywords in the question. In this case, it's might, consider, and then making decisions. All right, those 3 words for me are the key words. If you get a question in the exam that has a modal verb like might, it's a huge clue. You have to use modal verbs. Might, could be, maybe, because it's asking you to use speculation. What might people have to consider when making these decisions? You're not talking about you. You're talking about what other people might have to consider. So you have to use speculation. Maybe people consider, let's just look at this one, finding a job. Okay. So again, opinion phrases. From my point of view, in my, I try to avoid, in my opinion, and I try to avoid too much using I think, okay, just because everybody will be using it, but you have to use speculation. People might consider how close their work is to their home when they're looking for a job. Maybe they consider the pay, the salary, and they might even consider what type of work it is, if it's shifts. I think that I'm using speculation all the time, and the good thing is that the question itself gives me a clue there, because it says might in the question. Similar to last week, I think, when I mentioned paraphrasing. Can you paraphrase consider, and can you paraphrase decisions? Right? Instead of saying decisions, you can say choices. Instead of saying consider, you can say thinking about. What else? I don't know. But you get the idea. If you paraphrase these questions and paraphrase the words that Cambridge give you, you'll get more points. You'll definitely get more points. I'm going to go on to a different document, because it's one that I've prepared that it helps me and it helps you to visualize a lot more these things here. So I think it's this one. Ainara, can you see this document that says Part 3 Cambridge Speaking Test? Yeah, good. All right. Right, this is just a really basic document that I've drawn up, and I'll send you this after the meeting, all right? It's good because I've just got it down in a PDF format. Things to avoid, right? Let's go through these. Really, really important and simple, not complicated, but there are things that you mustn't do, you must not do, right? First of all, I've put here long terms at speaking. This is not a monologue, okay? Please, especially the person who starts the interaction, don't think that you have to speak for 30 seconds, right? This is an interaction. You have to interact with your partner. You have to ask them questions and ask them about their opinion. Try to keep it, the time that you speak, short, 10 seconds, 5, 15, maybe 20, but you don't want to go over 20. This has to go from one candidate to the other. It has to be dynamic. It has to keep moving, okay? If you start speaking for 25 or 30 seconds, that's not an interaction. That is a monologue, and they don't like that. Cambridge do not like it when you speak for too long, okay? I'm just going to go down to this one here. Don't stop speaking. What that means is, here in total, you have about 4 minutes to do the task. If you think you've finished and you stop speaking, the probability is that you haven't used the time, and the examiner will just look at you and not say anything because they're wanting you to continue. So when I say avoid stopping speaking, I don't mean speak for a long, long time, but I mean use all the time that you have. Use the full 4 minutes. Don't stop after 3.5 minutes thinking we've finished, because you haven't. Try to use all the time. Please avoid constantly agreeing all the time, okay? That's not a discussion. If you think about all the discussions that you have with your family, your friends, conversations in a bar or at university or at work, you don't agree constantly. You agree, you disagree, you partially agree, maybe with 50%, maybe you understand a certain amount of what the person says, but you don't always agree. I think there's a tendency in exams where people are nervous and they don't want to be rude and they constantly agree. Please don't do that. You must try to disagree at least with one point, because this gives you the opportunity to discuss and give a different opinion and contrast your ideas. If you, there's one thing that I've not put here, I'm going to type it because it's really important. Avoid speaking about all 5 options, okay? Lots of people think that you have to try to speak about all the 5 options. That is not the case, okay? You only have here 4 minutes in total. The first section is 2 minutes. If you speak about all those 5 options in only 2 minutes, it basically means that you didn't have a discussion. You didn't discuss. It's very difficult to speak about 5 different options in 2 minutes, okay? 2 or 3 maximum, okay? Don't try to speak about all 5 options. Try to discuss and debate 2 or 3 of them. Okay, I put this one here. Try to avoid comparing or choosing the best option. Okay, I'm going to go back and share the other one with you. Okay, this was a typical sample. This is another one. I'll move on to this one. Right, how important is motivation in these situations? The person who goes first, and the examiner doesn't mind who goes first, it's not a problem, but the person who does go first, what you should not do is think about, right, motivation, training for a marathon. I'm not going to say that I think training for a marathon needs more motivation than studying for an exam, or is more difficult than studying for an exam, or is more difficult than climbing a mountain. No, I'm going to choose training for a marathon, and I'm going to answer this question only about the option that I've chosen. How important is motivation when you train for a marathon? Okay, don't compare, just answer the question for the option that you have chosen. Keep it short, 10-15 seconds. Keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate your reason. Just keep it down to 2 basic sentences. Use linkers if you need to construct your sentence. Obviously, in particular, for instance, they will help you construct a sentence, right? The reason that you don't want to choose the option or say that you think that option is the most difficult or the best or needs the most motivation is exactly why part 3 speaking is separated into 2 sections, okay? There is a question or an interruption after about 2 minutes. The examiner will say to the candidates, okay, and in this case it would be, okay, now we would like you to try to choose the option that you think requires the most motivation. That's when you choose the option that you think needs the most motivation, but not before. After the interruption 2 minutes, that is your time to compare the options, but not before. Before that, in those first 2 minutes, choose the option, answer the question, and discuss it with your partner. Okay. Moving on. Going back to this. Whoops. Going back to this document. Okay. Key language. Right. Opinions. Agreeing and disagreeing, reacting, and body language. A lot of people don't realise that body language is important. I think the best thing to do in part 3 is turn and face your partner. Okay, look at them. Don't just ignore them and look at the piece of paper. Look at your partner. React to what they say. Opinions. Right. I'll make some text. I'll make some notes here. Try to avoid, in my opinion, because too many people will use that. I think that we mentioned last week a few different opinion phrases, in my view, as far as I'm concerned, to be totally honest. Okay, and then instead of using I think, you can use I reckon. Okay. Reckon, I believe. I'm not saying don't use I think, but try not to overuse it. And if you use reckon, which is a nice colloquial common way of saying I think, you'll get more points because you're using variation. And as I've mentioned before, variation is incredibly important in Cambridge. Here are some opinion phrases that are not in my opinion, right? Agreeing and disagreeing, and in particular disagreeing, which I always tell my students here in the academy, please get used to and practice disagreeing, okay? Every discussion that I've ever had in the world with my family, with my friends, there are some levels of disagreeing in there. Disagreeing is not a bad thing, it's not rude, it's just a different opinion and it makes it more realistic. Find some expressions of how to disagree, okay? Don't always say, I disagree. Yes, I agree. I completely agree. I totally disagree. They're good, they're okay. But try to find what I prefer and I like to use. I like partially disagreeing, or partially agreeing, I should say, right? Partially agreeing gives you the opportunity to disagree, but, you know, a little bit softer. You're not saying, no, that's completely wrong, I disagree completely. You can, but it's a bit uncomfortable. Partially disagreeing is a fantastic way to express to your partner that you agree with some of what they say, but you don't fully agree. Okay, so you can do this a few different ways. I see what you mean. However, and then it gives you the opportunity to use a contrast linker to give your contrast of opinion. This is very, very, very important. Okay, I see what you mean. I understand. Whoops, my typing's a little bit better this evening, but not the best. I understand what you are saying, but, and then you would give a contrast. Okay, I agree to a certain point, but, and then you give your contrasting opinion. This is really, really important, believe me. If you can learn how to partially agree or disagree with your partner, you will get more points, because the examiners want to see good discussion and a good interaction where you've got the ability to give different opinion and use contrasting opinions, right? I say here, go on to the next bit, reacting, right? What is reacting? It's something very basic, and it's something not very easy to do and feel natural and comfortable. But if you can do this, I guarantee you'll get more points. And reacting basically means like reacting words, reactions to what your partner says. You don't have to sit in complete silence while your partner is speaking. That's not normal. I don't know any Spanish person that when their friend is giving them opinion, they just sit there going like this. Impossible. You say things like, bueno, ¿qué dices? Right? You say all those things, and it's the same in English, right? Keep it simple. You don't have to make it complicated. Okay? You can say, really? You can say, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I guarantee that these are if you've got somebody that you can practice with, these are more difficult. I always find that in the classes in the academy and online, this part is what people find the most difficult, because they feel a bit stupid, they feel a bit silly. But if you can just react to some of what your partner says, you'll get more points. Cambridge examiners love a good interaction where people are interactive and they react to what their partner says. Okay, things like, well, maybe, okay, really? You can show surprise, you can agree, you can say, well, that's a good point. Yeah, I suppose so. Okay. Okay, all those things will help. I know it's not easy, but if you practice a couple of them and you try to, and you can do them in speaking, it'll help you get more points. Next, so this is like key language. Adjectives are, as we know, incredibly important and very prevalent in the whole exam. Listening, speaking, writing, they're everywhere. Okay. Lots of the questions contain adjectives, and I'm going to show you just a couple of examples. Okay. How important, right? Important is an adjective, and then so is easy. All right, they're not difficult ones. They're not complex. They're very easy. Okay, and then my next part actually on that form, sorry, on that document, was in fact how questions. I know that the circle's disappeared, so don't worry. You'll see that in this one, how important is motivation, and in the other one, it was how easy. Right, perfect opportunity to use quantifying, right? If the question is how important or how easy, I'm asking you how important you think something is. So you have to say very important, extremely important, incredibly important, or I reckon it's not important at all, or it's not important really. You have to try to quantify. If the question is how, it needs a quantifier. How easy? Oh, it's really simple. okay? You'll notice what I did there. I didn't say easy, I paraphrased and I said simple, okay? Some people might be able to say it's a piece of cake, right? We get points for an expression. But if the question is, how easy might it be to interest teenagers in these topics? You might say, I think it's incredibly easy. I think it would actually be very difficult. I don't think it would be easy at all. I don't think it would be very simple. Okay, I'm paraphrasing the adjective, but I'm using quantifiers to express how easy I believe it is in this particular question. Again, a lot of people they misinterpret these questions. They don't actually quantify. If you've got a question with how, you have to quantify. And these questions with how are very, very common in Cambridge. You see here how important is motivation, incredibly important. Think about paraphrasing important. It's easy. Essential, vital, crucial. There are three. You'll notice if you've looked at if you've got any books, study books or exam books, if you go to part 3, look at the questions. Many of the questions contain adjectives, okay? It's not a list of 20 adjectives, it's less, okay? It's things like important, useful, difficult, easy. They might ask you to speak about advantages and disadvantages, paraphrase them, but make sure that you try to find some synonyms for those typical common adjectives. Let me go back to my document again to see where I am. How questions, expressions. This is not as easy. Okay, let me just go back because I want to make sure that I've not missed anything. Yes, an important one, another important one. All these things are important. Let me speak about the second section of part 3. So as I've told you, it's 4 minutes in total. They give you about 2 minutes to discuss. After about 2 minutes or 2 minutes 20, something like that, the examiner will interrupt and say, right, okay, and we'll use this example. No, I don't want to use that one. Okay, we'll use this example. The examiner will say something like, okay, now we would like you to choose between both of you, between the two of you, which two of the options requires the most motivation, okay? It's in this part that you have more or less a minute and a half, and as the instruction suggests, try to agree on 2 of the options. They might only ask you to choose 1 of the options, okay? However, there's something important to remember. Please do not feel like you have to agree. I know that the instruction was try to choose 2 of the options that you believe need the most motivation. Okay, that's a great instruction, but you do not have to agree. In fact, I know 100% that the interactions that the Cambridge examiners enjoy the most and think that go the best is when the 2 candidates continue to disagree, okay? There's another good reason for that. If after the interruption where they ask you to try and choose 2 of the options, if you agree too quickly, there's a higher likelihood that you do not use all of the time that's allocated to you. If you continue to disagree, it means that you go on and on and on and on until the end of the 4 minutes. And in fact, if the examiner says to you, okay, thank you, that's the end of the part 3, not a problem, okay? As long as you have continued to discuss, you've used your opinion phrases, you've disagreed, you've debated the question, you've spoken about the 2 or 3 options. Also, last thing, well, quite quickly, a lot of students say to me, what happens if in the first 2 minutes you've only discussed 2 or 3 of the options, and after the interruption question about making a decision, you actually think that you want to choose one of the other options that you haven't discussed? Not a problem. It doesn't matter, okay? It's irrelevant if you've discussed 2 or 3 options in the first 2 minutes and in the end you actually choose the other option that you didn't discuss that you think in this case requires the most motivation, or is the easiest, or the most difficult, or the most important, whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Next thing, and moving on to sort of the last thing, a little bit more difficult here, and it's expressions, okay? Expressions are very difficult to, they're not difficult to learn. What's difficult about expressions is they are very specific to specific situations or subjects, okay? A lot of people say, so how can you learn some expressions and cross your fingers and hope that you get to use that expression in the exam? Well, if you start trying to learn lots of different expressions for lots of different possible subjects, the probability that you get that subject in the exam is very low, okay? What you should do is, and this is advice that I give all the time when you think about language, collocations, expressions, and phrasal verbs. Don't think about subjects that you might have to speak about in the exam. Think about the structure of the exam, okay? The one thing that never changes in this exam is the structure, okay? In part 3, as I've told you, and you know, or you should know now, the structure is that you are given a diagram. It has 4 different options. You have to discuss with your partner. After 2 minutes, more or less, they interrupt and say, right, try to make a decision and choose the one that needs the most motivation. And then, of course, you get another minute and a half and it stops. There are 3 key parts there or 4 to the structure. One is the start, okay? Somebody has to start, and it doesn't matter who. But what happens? Imagine if you start to be a little bit creative and use your imagination. If you decide to start the interaction, can you use an expression? And that an expression is about starting? Try to look for one on the internet. Likewise, at the end of the 4 minutes, if you think that you're coming towards the end, can you find an expression that is related to finishing or ending something? Okay. The third one, after 2 minutes, they ask you to make a decision. Can you find any expressions about making decisions? Okay, and you can verbally communicate that with your partner. Even the collocation, to make a decision, if you use that in the exam, you'll get some points. Imagine if I'm the examiner and after 2 minutes I say, okay, now we'd like you to try to choose the 2 options that require the most motivation. And I say, right, okay, let's try to make a decision. And I say that to my partner. I can use that in every single part 3 Cambridge exam in the world, right? Because the structure never changes. So I can say to my partner, okay, let's try to make a decision, okay? And when you do that, you score points. Let me just do this and let this person in who's late, but anyway. Let me go back to this. So when I talk about expressions, you have to be clever. You have to think about it more about the structure rather than a possible subject, because it would be very difficult to try to learn lots and lots of expressions about 20 possible subjects. Think about the structure constantly. I'm going to send you this very simple document, okay? It will give you a good reminder of what we've spoken about. All these things are very, very key, okay? Just remember variety, okay? Try to use variety. Don't use the same linkers. Don't always say on the one hand, on the other hand. Use despite, although, whereas. But it's the same with your opinion phrases, okay? Don't use in my opinion constantly. Try to find some nice, interesting, different opinion phrases. All opinion phrases are relatively common. I don't think you're going to find an opinion phrase that doesn't exist. I just like, as far as I'm concerned, from my point of view, in my view, to be completely honest, I reckon instead of I think, okay? Using this variety will get you points, I guarantee that. I'll send you this document. Is there anything else that I need to say? I don't think so. There's obviously, like with all of the exam, a lot of information, a lot of things to learn, and a lot of things to practice. But if you want the best of that, you have to come to classes every week, and I will teach you. But anyway, these webinars are good to get these key points, okay? To get these, I call them easy extra points. They're not easy because you have to practice them and you have to remember them, but putting them into practice will help you, and that's the key, really. Does anybody have any questions? I know that Amanda came a little bit late, but anyway, Amanda, don't worry, because the webinar is recorded and I'll put it on YouTube. If nobody has any questions, I think that we've finished. Thank you for coming. Hopefully next week the weather is terrible and not very sunny, so that more people will come. All right. But anyway, thank you for your attendance again. And next week, part 4, I'll send you an email as always with the screenshots with the document that I've made. And yes, that's it. All right. So enjoy the rest of your sunny Wednesday, and hope to see you next week. All right. Bye bye. See ya.